Michael Harper's grip tightened on the steering wheel of the SUV as they turned off the highway and crawled down the narrow dirt road that led to their new house. Or rather, the old mansion that would now be their new home. A light sea breeze blew through the open window, bringing with it the smell of salt and damp wood. Tall oak trees on either side of the road wove their branches over the car, creating a living tunnel. Strands of Spanish moss hung from the branches, giving the area an air of mystery. Michael's wife, Emma, leaned forward, peering through the trees as the silhouette of the house finally appeared in the distance. The mansion was just as the photographs had shown. A stately two-story house painted a faded white, with a wide porch and colonial columns. The roof was covered with gray tiles, darkened in places by age and moisture. Tall, shuttered windows looked out onto the driveway like the eyes of an old friend who had long awaited their arrival. The house was perched on a small knoll, protected from the ocean by a strip of dunes and a few pine trees. In the distance, behind the house, the silvery Atlantic could be seen. Michael stopped the car in front of the wrought iron gates, which were already open. Emma smiled and touched her husband's hand. "Here we are," she said quietly, her voice a mixture of joy and excitement. Michael smiled back, although inside he felt both tired from the long journey and relieved that the move was finally complete. He knew how much this house meant to Emma. She had fallen in love with it at first sight when she saw an ad for a historic mansion on the Charleston coast. Emma dreamed of her own home with history, which they could restore and breathe new life into. For Michael, it was a big decision to leave his familiar apartment in New York and move his entire life to the South. However, for the sake of his wife's happiness, he was ready to take this step. In addition, he could afford to work remotely part of the time or fly to New York for work meetings. Fortunately, the company met him halfway. The wheels crunched on the gravel driveway, and the car stopped just outside the porch. Michael turned off the engine. They sat in silence for a few moments, looking at the house, knowing that it was theirs now. Emma got out first, stood up straight, and took a deep breath of the damp, warm air. Her brown hair was immediately tousled by the wind, carrying the scent of the ocean. "It's beautiful," she said, looking around the facade. "A little shabby, of course, but so beautiful." Michael walked around the car, stood next to her, and put his arm around her shoulders. "It's beautiful," he agreed, "and very large. I hope there were no ghosts included." He smiled, trying to be funny. The house really did look like a set for a Southern Gothic fairy tale, centuries-old oaks, moss, the sea nearby. Emma laughed quietly. "If there are, I think they'll be friendly," she replied. "And then, we have you, the protector from all ghosts." Michael nodded, though the joke sounded a little tentative. He knew that old houses sometimes held surprises, creaky floors, old wiring, maybe mold somewhere in the basement. But he also believed that all of these things could be fixed. The main thing was that Emma was happy. They began unloading their things. The trunk and back seats were filled with boxes of clothes, books, kitchenware, the bare necessities of life. The rest of the furniture and larger items would arrive on a moving truck later, and they were going to buy some things on the spot in Charleston to furnish the house in a suitable style. Emma had deliberately left some of the old furniture behind, thinking that modern furniture would not suit such a house. It would be better to look for antiques or replicas. As they walked up the steps, they heard the boards creak softly under their feet. Emma pulled the set of keys the realtor had given them from her bag and found the largest and oldest. The lock turned with difficulty, as if reluctantly letting in the new owners. The door opened, releasing the musty air of long confinement from the house. Emma entered first. It was cool and dim inside, despite the sunny day. The windows were partially shuttered, leaving narrow strips of light on the floor. Michael fumbled for the light switch near the door miraculously. The electricity was already connected, although the chandelier under the ceiling of the hall only dimly blinked a couple of bulbs. "We'll have to change the bulbs and check the wiring," Michael said in the professional tone of a man accustomed to thinking practically. He set the box of books down on the floor and looked around. The hall was impressive. High ceilings with stucco, a wide staircase leading to the second floor, a floor of darkened wooden parquet. The paint on the walls had peeled off in places, revealing old wallpaper with roses. The smell of old wood and dust mingled with the light aroma of the sea, penetrating through the open windows above. Emma ran her fingers carefully along the carved wooden railing of the stairs. "Look at this work," she whispered enthusiastically. "It's hand-carved, probably a 19th century original." Michael smiled at her enthusiasm. "Yes, it looks impressive, but it seems to be holding on tightly. That's already good." They moved on, exploring the ground floor. The living room was spacious, with a white marble fireplace, above which hung an old mirror in a tarnished bronze frame. On the floor was a scattering of fallen plaster from a crack in the ceiling. Beyond the living room was a dining room with long windows overlooking the garden, and beyond that the kitchen, surprisingly large for an old house, had apparently been renovated 20 years ago. It contained relatively modern cupboards and a stove, albeit covered in a layer of dust. With every step, Emma became more and more convinced. The house was amazing, but there was a lot of work ahead. She tried not to notice the dirt and dust. Pictures were already forming in her head, how they would put it all in order, how they would arrange the furniture, how they would sit together in the evening by the fireplace, listening to the sound of the surf in the distance. "Hey, what are you thinking about?" Michael called out softly, putting another box on the floor and wiping the sweat from his forehead. "Let's take a break." Emma blinked and smiled, coming back from her thoughts. "Yes, of course. I'm happy, Michael. I can imagine how we'll arrange everything here. Thank you for supporting me with this house." He came closer and kissed her tenderly on the forehead. "Your happiness is the most important thing to me. If this house is what you wanted, I'm glad we were able to make it happen." She pressed herself against him gratefully. At such moments, Emma felt that she loved her husband even more than on their wedding day. He always tried to make her dreams come true. She understood that he himself had to sacrifice comfort. Work in New York required his presence, and now he had to live in two cities so as not to give up his career. This meant that on weekdays she would be alone here, and he would be in New York, coming only on weekends. While they were agreeing, this did not seem so terrible. But now, standing in the half-empty old house, Emma felt a slight anxiety. Would she cope alone? Would she be overwhelmed by loneliness, far from the usual bustle and friends? Pushing those thoughts aside, she decided not to spoil the joyful day by worrying about the future. Everything would work out. She would have a job rebuilding the house, would be a full-time project, and she might even make new friends in Charleston, find interests. "Let's eat," Michael suggested. "I'm starving after the journey. I noticed a supermarket on the way to town where I can go to buy groceries. What do you think about dinner at the new place?" "Sounds great," Emma chimed in. "But nothing complicated. Maybe we can just buy something ready-made or order a pizza." She looked around the kitchen. Cooking now meant first washing the floor and tables, unpacking the dishes. No, today she could treat herself to ready-made food. "Okay, I'll be right there. I'll also see how far it is from here to civilization." Michael smiled. "You unpack something in the meantime, but don't lift anything heavy alone, okay?" Emma stuck her tongue out at him, feigning offense. "Am I that fragile?" "Don't worry, I'll just put our things on top." Michael, still smiling, headed for the door. A minute later, Emma heard the car start, the tires crunching on the gravel, heading back to the highway. The house was silent again, except for the wind knocking on the shutters and the creaking of an unoiled closet door somewhere. She sighed and looked around. For the first time that day, Emma was alone in the new house. There was a faint thud somewhere upstairs, probably a draft slamming an unlocked room door. The sounds of an old house. Nothing to worry about. To drive away the creeping feeling of loneliness, Emma decided to get busy. She went back to the hall and began unpacking the box of bed linens. It would be nice to have clean sheets on the bed for the night. Boxes and bags were scattered all over the hall, but there was no point in unpacking everything at once until the rooms were cleaned. Better to focus on the essentials: bedding, towels, a minimum of dishes. She climbed up the stairs and opened the door to the bedroom they had chosen on their first visit. It was a large room with a high ceiling and two windows overlooking the ocean. A ray of setting sun shone through the dirty glass, casting a golden glow on the floor. In the corner was a bulky old wardrobe with a mirror on the door, left over from the previous owners, and in the middle was their own bed, or rather, the mattress and bed frame that the movers had brought that morning and had already managed to assemble. Emma straightened a clean sheet on the mattress, made the bed with fresh linen of a soft blue color, which she had thoughtfully packed in a separate suitcase so as not to have to search for it for a long time later. She threw a light blanket over it. It immediately became cozier. Now they had an island of comfort in this chaos. She imagined how in the evening she and Michael would settle in here, tired but happy, and listen to the ocean roaring outside the window. Thinking about her husband brought warmth to her chest again. He was such a good man he had started all this for her. He was ready to endure the inconveniences, if only she could realize her dream. I have to do everything so that he doesn't regret it, Emma thought. She decided that when Michael returned with the groceries, she would surprise him by setting the dinner on the veranda if there was a table and chairs there. She seemed to have seen an old wooden bench on the porch. She could sit there and admire the sunset. Inspired by this idea, Emma went back downstairs. She came out onto the porch. It was getting dark. The western sky had flared up with orange-pink fire reflected in the ocean. The air became cooler, and with it the insects woke up. The chirping of cicadas came from the garden. On the porch there really was a long wooden rocking chair with a high back. Only the paint was peeling, but it seemed to be strong. Nearby were a couple of wicker chairs and a small round table. Everything was dusty, but for lack of anything better it would do. Emma quickly ran inside for a rag and a bottle of water, wiped down the seats and table, washing away the surface dust. There was no time for a thorough cleaning, and it would soon be dark. Having finished this, she went back and unpacked the box in the kitchen, where she had put several candles and candlesticks. Before leaving, she knew that the atmosphere would come in handy. She found 2 tall candles, set them in copper candlesticks that she had inherited from her grandmother, and put them aside for later. She would light them when it was time for dinner. Suddenly, her phone rang loudly in the silence. The sound echoed through the vaulted hallway, making Emma jump. She pulled the smartphone out of her jeans pocket. A call from Michael. "Hi," she replied happily, pressing the phone to her ear. "Hi, darling," my husband's voice was heard in the receiver. "I'm already at the entrance to the store. Listen, there's such a huge supermarket here. I'm even at a loss. Our refrigerator is empty. We need to get the basics. Have you managed to make a list?" Emma hit herself on the forehead. In the hustle and bustle, she had completely forgotten to think about what they needed. "Oh, sorry. I got distracted and... Anyway, take the standard set. Eggs, milk, bread, coffee is a must. Something for sandwiches, cheese, vegetables. Oh, buy a bottle of wine. Let's celebrate moving in. And something ready for dinner. Maybe grilled chicken and salad." Michael chuckled. "I can already imagine the prepared food section. Okay, chicken and salad. And what wine do you prefer, madam? Chardonnay, Sauvignon Blanc? Give me some white cold." Emma smiled into the phone. "It will be done. Anyway, I'll call if I forget anything. I'll try to be quick. I'll be there soon." "Don't rush. I'll prepare something here in the meantime," she said mysteriously. "Are you already intriguing me? Okay, I'll be patient. Kisses." "Kisses," she repeated and hung up. Having hidden the phone, Emma looked around the kitchen with satisfaction. So, there will be food, there will be wine, there are candles. She can get 2 glasses from the box with dishes. She rummaged in one of the boxes marked with a sticker, "Kitchen." The glasses were found quite quickly, wrapped in paper. Having taken them out, Emma wondered, where will they cool the wine? The refrigerator is still empty, and it seems it is turned off. She opened a massive old refrigerator with rounded doors. It is dark inside. There is electricity, but the refrigerator, apparently, was not connected to the network, or it is broken. What a problem. Okay, there's an ice bucket, and you can do without the strong cooling if the store is nearby. Or they can drink it slightly cool. Michael likes his white wine well chilled, but what can you do? Deciding not to dwell on it, Emma continued to quickly create a cozy atmosphere. She laid a checkered tablecloth on the table on the porch, took one for picnics, and put out candles. She brought 2 chairs from the hall. The rocking chairs were still dusty and damp, still drying after wiping. She put out the glasses. She looked over the work. It turned out nice, although simple. She will light the candles when Michael arrives. Back inside, she decided to unpack some more boxes in the living room so she wouldn't have to sit in the chaos later. Opening one, she found framed family photos. On the top was their wedding photo, a young, happy Michael and Emma smiling at each other against the backdrop of a blooming garden. Emma ran her finger tenderly over the glass. 5 years had passed since that day. There had been difficulties, of course, and quarrels, but they had always been faithful to each other and supported each other in everything. She placed the photo on the mantelpiece, next to another framed photo of her and Michael against the backdrop of a New York skyscraper taken last fall. That's it. Let our memories be in this house too, she thought. A streak of light flashed in the doorway car headlights. Michael was back. Emma hurried to the door. On the porch, she saw their SUV pull into the yard. The sun had almost set, and dusk was approaching. Michael got out of the car with 2 large paper bags in his hands. "Hello again," he said cheerfully. "How much have I missed you?" "Very," she answered, laughing, walking down the steps to meet him. "Let me help you." "Be careful, this is heavy," he warned, but he gave her one package. Together, they carried the groceries into the kitchen. Michael took off his jacket, looking around. "Oh, I see you've settled in." He noticed the candlesticks on the table by the entrance. "And you've even put the photos up." Emma looked into the bags. "Wow, it's like you brought food for a week," she joked, taking out a bottle of wine and groceries. "I took everything you advised and a few other little things," my husband responded. "I think there's a shortage of butter, flour, and salt here, so I decided to stock up on the basics." He handed her a bouquet of wild flowers. "This is for you." I saw a flower stall at the exit of the store and thought that our housewarming dinner would be incomplete without a bouquet. Emma accepted the flowers with emotion. Wild flowers, modest ones, a couple of daisies, a sprig of lavender, something yellow. "How sweet. Thank you, darling," she kissed him. "I'll find the vase." The vase was also somewhere in the boxes, but Emma remembered throwing one glass jar into the car with the tools. Sure enough, an empty coffee can was found on the shelf. She poured water into it and put the flowers in it. The improvised vase was ready. The bouquet went to decorate their table on the porch. "Wonderful." Emma assessed the prepared place, straightening the flowers. "Look, it's beautiful." Michael followed her out and whistled. "Romance, candles, tablecloth. I feel like I'm at a resort." "Sit down, sir," Emma said with deliberate formality, pushing back her chair. "Dinner will be served immediately." Michael laughed loudly and sat up. "As you say, madam." Emma took the bags of food from his hands. The store had not only chicken, but also potato salad, a fresh baguette, even a piece of pie for dessert. She quickly transferred everything to plates, glad that she had thought to wash a couple of plates beforehand. Meanwhile, Michael opened a bottle of wine with his penknife. They had not looked for a corkscrew, but the knife successfully dealt with the cork. Finally, everything was ready. They sat opposite each other by candlelight against the backdrop of the twilight sky, where the glow of sunset still glimmered and the first stars were already shimmering timidly over the ocean. Cicadas were buzzing in the air, and waves were pounding somewhere in the distance. "To us," Michael said quietly, raising his glass. "To our house," Emma added, clinking glasses with him. The wine was cold enough to refresh her after a hot day. Emma took a sip and leaned back in her chair, allowing herself to relax for the first time that day. Everything seemed perfect at that moment, the house, the evening, and her husband nearby. "You know," she said a few minutes later, when they had already tried the chicken, "I was a little scared today." "What?" he asked softly, placing his hand on her palm. "Well, the fact that I'll be alone here often," she admitted. "The house is big, the city is new, no friends, no one. It didn't scare me before, but when you left for the store, I started feeling a little uneasy." Probably, it's just the first few days. Michael squeezed her hand. I understand. And honestly, I'm also worried about leaving you alone. If I could, I'd move my work here. But for now, I definitely need to be in New York at least a few days a week. I'll try to come more often, okay? And if you suddenly feel really sad or scared, call me right away, even in the middle of the night. Emma smiled sadly. Of course, I'll call, but I can handle it, really. I'll have a lot of things to do around the house, no time to get bored. Yes, that's right, Michael nodded. By the way, tomorrow the movers will arrive with the rest of the things. I made arrangements for the morning. Excellent. I'll have to show them where to put what. It's a pity your office isn't ready yet. But for now, you can work from the living room. I'll clear the table there. Don't worry, we'll figure it out. He waved it off. I'm more thinking about who to call to help with the renovation. We can't handle it ourselves. We need a smart contractor or architect who will undertake the restoration properly. I don't want to ruin everything with amateurish interventions. Emma perked up. Oh, I was just finding out about that. Remember, I was chatting on a forum for lovers of antiquity. They recommended a local architect to me there. He seems to specialize in restoring historical buildings. He was praised for his careful approach. Really? You didn't say. Michael raised his eyebrows in surprise. I wanted to talk to him first, to understand whether it was worth inviting him. By the way, tomorrow afternoon he promised to come and see the house and estimate the scope of work. Well done, you, her husband praised her. You haven't been sitting around doing nothing. Emma looked down with a smile. Well, I'm really excited about this project. I want to start as soon as possible. And what is the name of this restoration master? Daniel Richardson, she replied, recalling the correspondence. An architect lives in Charleston. I'll remind him tomorrow morning. Michael took a sip of wine and winked. I hope it's not too expensive. We've already spent a lot on it. I'll try to negotiate, Emma assured cheerfully. If anything, I'll find someone else. There are plenty of old houses here. There's probably a market for services. Of course you can handle it, he agreed. It's a pity I won't be able to be there tomorrow. But tell me later, okay? Of course, she nodded. They sat for a long time, talking about plans and details, discussing how they would arrange the rooms, what colors to choose for the walls, laughing, remembering funny moments from past renovations. Night enveloped the coast, the stars lit up brighter, and when the candles had almost burned down, Michael finally stood up and extended his hand to Emma. It's time to rest. The day has been long. She agreed. Together they cleared the empty plates from the table, blew out the candles, and went into the house. It was pitch dark inside. They felt their way to the stairs by the light of their phones. Emma opened the bedroom window to let in some fresh air. The faint sound of the surf was coming in. Michael kicked off his shoes and sat down wearily on the bed. There'll be a lot of work tomorrow, he muttered, pulling off his socks. But never mind, the main thing is we're home. Emma lay down next to him, feeling the pleasant languor after a long day drawing her towards sleep. Yes, we're home, she repeated quietly. Michael put his arms around her, pulling her close. She settled against his chest, listening to his steady heartbeat. Soon they both fell asleep, for the first time under the roof of an old house on the south coast, which kept its secrets to the leisurely accompaniment of the sea and the whisper of the centuries-old oaks outside the window. The morning greeted them with bright sunshine shining through the cracks in the shutters and the noise of a bird perched on the windowsill and loudly greeting the new day. Michael woke up before Emma. Used to getting up early on weekdays, he couldn't stay in bed for long, even on the weekend. Carefully getting out so as not to wake his wife, Michael pulled on jeans and a t-shirt and went downstairs. The house looked even more neglected in the daylight than it had seemed yesterday in the twilight. Dust and dirt were visible at every step. In the living room, rays of sunlight broke through the dirty windows, illuminating the dust particles in the air. But Michael looked at all this without despondency. On the contrary, these traces of time had their own charm. The main thing is that the house is solid and does not fall apart. The rest is a matter of technology and time. In the kitchen, he found the coffee maker they had unpacked the day before, filled it with water from a bottle. The water from the tap looked suspiciously yellowish, and apparently the pipes needed cleaning. He poured in ground coffee from the products he had saved and turned it on. The machine buzzed, spreading an invigorating aroma. While the coffee was brewing, Michael went out onto the porch and stretched. The morning air was warm but fresh. A cool breeze blew in from the ocean. The movers with the things were supposed to arrive around 10. There was still time to wash up and have breakfast. He came back upstairs with 2 steaming mugs of coffee. Emma was already awake and sitting on the bed, wrapped in a sheet, looking dreamily out the window they had forgotten to close. The sea breeze stirred the curtain. "Good morning, beautiful," Michael greeted her, holding out a mug. "Coffee in bed." Emma smiled and accepted the drink. "Good morning. You're so early. Thank you. Please, how did you sleep in the new place?" She took a sip and thought. "You know, it's amazingly good. I fell asleep as soon as I put my head on the pillow, and when I woke up, it felt like I'd always lived here. I just dreamed something strange." "What exactly?" he asked with interest, settling down next to the mug. "It's like I'm wandering around the house looking for someone," Emma frowned, trying to remember. "I called out, but there's no response. The rooms are empty, and I'm afraid I won't find someone. Maybe I was looking for you." Michael put his arm around her shoulders. "I didn't dream of anything at all with you, I just passed out. But you won't lose me, I'm here." He kissed her on the cheek. Emma relaxed under his touch and pushed away the remnants of her troubled sleep. "I know, it's all nonsense." They drank coffee quietly, discussing the plan for the day. Soon, as agreed, the truck with their furniture and things arrived. Michael went out to meet the workers. While they were carrying boxes and cabinets, Emma was in charge, showing where to put what: the bed for the guest room in the second bedroom on the right, the sofa in the living room near the fireplace, the dining table in the dining room. The work began to boil. The house came alive with the sound of footsteps, voices. In the hustle and bustle, Emma did not even immediately notice how the time was approaching noon, and she had an appointment with the architect. When the last items were unloaded and the movers left, Michael looked at his watch. "Phew, we made it. I thought it would take longer to sort it out." Emma wiped the sweat from her forehead with the back of her hand. She had been following him everywhere, almost helping him carry things, and was pretty tired. "Yes, thank you, the guys are great." "You well done," Michael corrected her. "Without you, they would have put everything in the wrong place." She smiled, but her gaze was absent-minded. She was clearly thinking about something else. "What happened?" Michael asked, alarmed. "Daniel, the architect, is due to arrive," Emma explained. "I just wanted to tidy myself up a bit before the meeting. What if he's due any minute and I'm all disheveled?" She pointed to her clothes: an old t-shirt, dusty jeans, her hair pulled back somehow. Michael laughed. "A cute amateur builder look. I think it suits you." Emma rolled her eyes, but smiled too. "Okay, I'll at least go wash my face and comb my hair." "Go, I'll meet our guest if anything happens," Michael nodded. She disappeared upstairs, and Michael, taking advantage of the pause, went into the kitchen to drink some water. He had barely managed to pour himself a glass when he heard the noise of a car approaching. Looking out the window, he saw a dark blue old Volvo stop at the gate. A man of about 30 got out of it, wearing beige trousers and a light blue shirt, the sleeves of which were casually rolled up to the elbows. The stranger looked around, checked something on his phone, and headed toward the porch. Michael put down the glass and hurried to open the door to the terrace. "Good afternoon. You are probably Daniel." The guest climbed up the first step and smiled affably. "Yes, that's right, Daniel Richardson. And you, I suppose, are Michael Harper." "That's right." Michael extended his hand, and Daniel shook it firmly. His handshake was confident, firm. "I'm very glad you could come. Pleased to meet you. You have a beautiful house," Daniel said, glancing at the facade. "I saw the photo in the ad, of course, but it's impressive in person." Michael sighed, nodding. "Thank you, although there is still a lot of work to do. That is why we contacted you. Come in." He gestured for the architect to come inside and stepped back to let his guest into the hall. Daniel entered and looked around the spacious hall with the staircase. Oh, what space! Excellent details have been preserved. He pointed to the ceiling moldings, to the carved railings. I'm glad you decided to restore and not completely modernize. We appreciate the history of these things, Michael responded. Well, my wife does, first of all. It's her dream to restore the house, preserving the spirit of the Old South. As if hearing her words, quick steps were heard from above, and Emma appeared on the stairs. She had managed to change. Now she was wearing a light cream-colored summer dress, and she was quickly combing her hair as she walked. Hello, I apologize for keeping you waiting, she addressed the architect, slightly out of breath from the hasty descent. Daniel looked up, and for a moment there was a flicker of admiration in his eyes as he saw the young woman. He immediately smiled pleasantly. Hello, Daniel Richardson. It's a pleasure to meet you in person. Emma came over and they shook hands. Likewise. I'm Emma Harper. I'm so glad you agreed to help us. I'm only too happy to work with such a wonderful house, he replied. It's an architectural monument, you could say. Do you know the history of this mansion? Emma and Michael exchanged glances. They didn't really know much. The house had been built in the mid-19th century, belonged to the Foxworth plantation family, and then changed hands many times. Superficially, Emma admitted, it would be interesting to know more. Meanwhile, Daniel took a folder out of his bag. I looked up the archives just in case when you wrote me the address, he said with the pleasure of a man passionate about his business. The house was built in 1853 by a certain Jonathan Foxworth. He owned a rice plantation nearby. After the Civil War, his descendants went broke and sold the house. At the beginning of the 20th century, the mansion even served as a small boarding house, then became private property again. The Robertson family lived here for the last 30 years, but after the owner's death, the house stood empty for about 2 years until you bought it. Emma listened with shining eyes. Wow, you really did some research. Daniel was slightly embarrassed. Well, I like to dig into the history of buildings. It helps during restoration to know what might have been where originally, what changes were made. Michael smiled as he watched his wife and the architect chat animatedly. He felt grateful to this man for sharing Emma's enthusiasm for the house. But he himself had to leave soon. Work, even though it was Saturday, he needed to call the office, check his email. He touched Emma's hand delicately. Honey, you and Mr. Richardson look around the house for now, and I'll leave you for an hour. I need to do some work, okay? Emma nodded. Of course. We'll just walk through all the rooms. Then tell me your opinion, okay? Of course, Michael agreed. He turned to Daniel. You arrange everything, look around, and I'll join you later. Daniel nodded. Okay, don't worry. Mrs. Harper and I will just get a first impression. Michael noticed how respectfully the architect addressed her by her last name. In this day and age, that was surprisingly gallant. He left them and went upstairs to work on his laptop. Meanwhile, Emma led Daniel around the house. They started with the hall and living room. As you can see, the stucco work needs to be done here. She pointed to a crack in the ceiling. Plus, all the electrics need to be checked. They're a bit old. Daniel looked around carefully, occasionally making notes in his notebook or taking pictures of something on his tablet. The moldings can be restored. You need to find a craftsman who specializes in this kind of decor. There are a couple of good guys in Charleston. Of course, it's better to replace the electrics, but covertly so as not to damage the walls. What about the plumbing and sewerage? Emma shook her head. We don't know yet. The water is rusty. I think the pipes are also old. Besides, we want to make a second bathroom on the second floor. There's only one now. I see. Connecting the utilities is a separate story. We'll get to it. Daniel wrote something down. Your windows are original wooden, 19th century. The glass is old, with bubbles, see the distortions. It's beautiful, but there are a lot of cracks. It's probably drafty. They can be restored, sealed to keep the heat in. I'd like to keep the original glass if possible, Emma said, running her hand over the frame. It's so authentic. I understand you. We will try. Sometimes, of course, you have to sacrifice authenticity for comfort, especially with the climate, there is humidity, heat. But we will think about a compromise. They walked further into the dining room. Daniel noticed the floor. The parquet is oak, probably original. It needs to be taken apart and sanded. But the doors, it seems, have already been replaced. The hinges are modern. Emma was surprised by his observation. Nothing will be hidden from you. He laughed. That's the job. I've seen a lot of old houses, and the eye itself can tell what's old and what was finished later. This is a plus, by the way. If the doors are no longer antique, your conscience won't bother you if you replace them with new ones well-styled to look antique. Emma nodded. She liked how passionately Daniel talked about the details. It was obvious that he truly loved his profession. In addition, he combined competence and easy ease in communication. She immediately stopped being embarrassed by her inexperienced look and asked many questions. He willingly answered, sometimes with humor. For example, in the kitchen, seeing old tiles on the wall from the 80s, Emma complained. This tile definitely needs to be removed. It's a nightmare. Daniel frowned dramatically. What are you talking about? This is vintage a la 1980. Maybe someday it will become fashionable. Retro fans will be delighted. Emma snorted. Maybe in 100 years. No, a beautiful apron made of Moroccan tiles, or just painting would be better. I agree, you can afford something modern here. This is not a historical part. Daniel nodded. The kitchen should be modernized in terms of technology, but decorated in a style that matches the rest of the house. Yes, I think so too. She was glad that their opinions coincided. After the first floor, they went up to the second. Along the way, Daniel noted that the stairs were quite sturdy, but the banisters needed to be refastened, and the carpeting, the old, worn carpet in the middle of the steps, should be removed and the wood restored. Emma agreed with everything. Upstairs, she showed the bedrooms, the only old bathroom with rather ancient plumbing, the attic, where a narrow staircase led. They did not climb up, but simply noted that they needed to check the roof. In the master bedroom, Emma was even a little embarrassed. The bed was already made, their things were there. But Daniel only glanced briefly, more interested in the windows and walls. The room has good proportions. Even the stucco in the corners is preserved. And is this an antique wardrobe? He approached the massive wardrobe. I think so. It was left by the previous owners. We thought about keeping it. We liked it, Emma answered. That's the right decision. It fits in perfectly, the architect approved, stepping back to get a general idea of the view. Having walked around everything, they returned downstairs. Emma felt pleasantly tired from the walk, but at the same time excited. Now so many plans were more clearly outlined. She spoke enthusiastically. Well, what do you think? I think the house is in good condition for its age, right? More than, Daniel confirmed, leafing through his notes. I expected the worst. Structurally, everything seems fine. I didn't see any load-bearing cracks. The floors are a little slanted, but that's normal for such an old house. I'll check the level later, but I don't think it's critical. The roof, of course, is unknown, but if it leaked badly, we would have noticed stains. So the main thing is cosmetics, replacing utilities, reinforcing some beams, restoring windows, doors, moldings. A lot of things, but everything is doable. Emma breathed a sigh of relief. You make me happy. Yesterday I was afraid that the house would suddenly start falling apart or something. No, classic is old quality. Besides, the previous owners probably maintained it minimally. According to the documents, the roof was relaid in the 1990s, and the wiring was partially changed at the same time. Oh, good. Emma took the notebook. Let's maybe go through it point by point now, so that we can understand the scope of work and the approximate cost. I wrote down questions for myself. They sat down at the old dining room table. They hadn't yet had time to assemble their own. Daniel began methodically answering each point she had prepared, how much it would cost to replace the wiring, how long it would take to restore the windows, where to get the materials for the molding, what permits were needed. The house wasn't a listed building, so they had a lot of freedom, but some work still needed to be approved by the city. Daniel promised to help with the paperwork. Time flew by. They were already deep in discussions about color options for the facade. Emma wanted to freshen up the paint, but was unsure whether to keep it white or try a light blue shade, typical of southern homes. Daniel advised white or cream, since the house was a classic colonial. At some point, closer to 1 o'clock, Michael joined them. He came down, stretching. "Wow, how are things going here?" Emma raised her head, as if forgetting about her husband for a moment, and nodded happily. "Michael, everything is great. Daniel says the house is stronger than we thought. We're already making a list of the work." Michael noticed the lively color in her cheeks, and her smile. She was clearly in her element. "I'm very glad to hear it," he said, sitting down next to her and looking over her shoulder at her notes. "Wow, you've got a lot of points there." "Don't be alarmed, Mr. Harper," Daniel intervened. "A lot of this is small stuff. I've listed everything I think needs to be done to get the house in order. But ultimately, the decision is yours, and some things can be put off." Michael ran his eyes down the list. Wiring, plumbing, paint, floors, windows. Yes, there is a lot of work. But it is better to do everything at once than to redo it later. "I think so too," the architect supported him. "If the budget allows, of course." Michael glanced at Emma. "We'll sort out the budget. We'd like to have a rough idea of the cost and time frame. I'd like us to move in fully by autumn at least." Emma added, "We have already moved in, but keep in mind the fully renovated option." "It's June now," Daniel figured. "Fall. If we start in the next couple of weeks, we might have the main stuff done by October, but some of the little things might drag on." "That will suit us," said Michael. "And of course we need to start soon, while it's summer." "Yes, it's comfortable in the summer. The weather is usually dry," Daniel nodded. Emma stood up. "Maybe we should have lunch and continue discussing. We have food, and frankly, I'm hungry." She looked at the men. Daniel waved his hands. "Oh no, I wouldn't want to impose." "What are you saying?" Michael replied hospitably. "You are our guest, and for me you are a savior, since you are going to relieve me of the necessity of repairing the roof myself. Stay and have lunch." Emma had already taken out the pie and cheese, and the remains of the chicken from the kitchen. They had something to snack on. She noted, "Our menu is modest, though yesterday's purchases, but it's definitely enough for 3. Daniel, realizing that it was awkward to refuse, smiled gratefully. "In that case, with pleasure." They settled in the kitchen, as the dining room was still filled with boxes. At the kitchen table, hastily assembled from parts Michael had managed to screw on the legs that morning, the 3 of them ate blueberry pie and drank lemonade that Emma had made from purchased lemons and sugar. The conversation turned to more personal topics, moving away from construction estimates. Michael asked Daniel, "How long have you lived in Charleston?" "Almost 10 years, he replied. "I came here after college. I'm originally from Virginia, but I fell in love with this town and stayed." "It's really beautiful here," Emma noted. "We haven't seen much yet, but the historic center charmed us when we came to see the house." "You'll definitely like it once you get settled in," Daniel said enthusiastically. "If you need a tour or advice on where to go, just ask. I'm not a native, but I know a lot." "Thank you, that's a good idea," she replied. "Do you have a family here? Are you married?" Michael glanced briefly at his wife to see if she was being too nosy, but the question sounded more like a friendly one. Daniel didn't seem offended. "No, I'm not married. I was engaged once, but it didn't work out. So I'm still a bachelor. My parents live in Richmond, Virginia, and I visit them a couple of times a year." "I see," Emma smiled warmly. "Well then, you are a freelance artist, entirely dedicated to architecture." He laughed. "You could say that. Yes, work takes up most of my time, but I don't complain, I love it." "It shows," Michael said, getting up to clear away the empty plates. He liked the architect. Pleasant, not arrogant, competent. He might look a little young, but if he already had a good reputation, then he could handle it. Lunch was over. Daniel glanced at his watch. Wow, it's already 3 o'clock. I've probably tired you out with my stories. Not at all, Emma objected. On the contrary, everything is so interesting. Michael nodded. But we probably won't take up your entire day off. Daniel collected the papers. Yes, I still need to stop by the office today, prepare an estimate while the measurements are fresh. Then, with your permission, I'll take my leave. Emma walked him to the porch, Michael following behind. They said goodbye and agreed that Daniel would email them a detailed plan of the work and a rough estimate in the coming days. He thanked them again for the treat, got into his car and drove away, raising dust on the road. Emma stood there, watching the Volvo, then turned to her husband. So, how do you like him? Michael put his hand on her waist as he walked back into the house. Very smart. And it is clear that it is important for him to make it beautiful. I think we were not mistaken. Emma sighed happily. Yes, I think so too. He noticed so much, even the little things, and he suggested good solutions. You're glowing, Michael said with a smile as they walked inside. I'm glad you'll have a good partner in this. I feel safe leaving you here, knowing that a professional is taking care of the house. Emma patted his hand. I'm glad about that too. They began to unpack the rest of their things. Michael was due to fly to New York the next day for another work week, and Emma tried not to think about it. It had been so nice to spend the last couple of days together. But Sunday evening was approaching, which meant that they would soon have to part ways until the weekend. And indeed, Sunday flew by. There was plenty to do: sort out clothes, plug in the washing machine, buy small things like a shower curtain. In the afternoon, they went to downtown Charleston, bought the necessary things, and at the same time walked around the historic district, admiring the colorful houses on Rainbow Row, and walked along the Battery Embankment, where old mansions towered. Holding hands, they felt almost like tourists on vacation. At one point, looking at the waters of the bay, Emma quietly said, "It's a pity that you're leaving tomorrow." Michael, understanding her mood, hugged her. "I'll call every day, and maybe I can find time to come in the middle of the week, if possible." "Really?" She looked at him hopefully. "I'll try. I don't promise, but I want to." Emma pressed herself against him in the wind. "I'll be waiting." Late in the evening, when they returned home, tired but happy, there was very little time left for the two of them. Michael had to pack his suitcase. The flight was early. Emma quietly fussed around nearby, helping to fold shirts, although there were tears in her eyes. She always had a hard time with even short separations, and this was a new environment. It would be unusual. Michael tried to calm her down with kind words, promises of a quick meeting. On Monday morning, they got up before it was light. Michael ordered a taxi to the airport. In the semi-dark hallway, in front of the open door, they hugged each other goodbye for a long time. "Everything will be fine," Michael whispered, kissing her hair. "You're strong." "I'll just miss you," she answered dully. "Me too, darling." Finally, the obligatory honk of a taxi interrupted their embrace. Michael picked up his bag, kissed her goodbye, and ran down the steps. Emma watched him go, her arms wrapped around herself. The gray pre-dawn sky over the ocean promised a hot day, and a new phase of her life was beginning days alone, while her husband was in another city. She sighed, feeling as if the house had gone back to sleep with Michael gone. But within a couple of hours, everything had changed. Daniel appeared on the threshold with the working drawings and the first batch of builders he had brought for an inspection. The house filled with the sound of knocking and the voices of the crew discussing the scope of the work. Emma had no time to mope. She plunged into the hustle and bustle of restoration, not even suspecting where it would lead her. The next few weeks flew by unnoticed and at the same time intense. From early morning until late evening, the mansion was in full swing. Daniel took on the project with enthusiasm, personally showing up on site almost every day. He brought in a proven team of builders and restorers, several carpenters, an electrician, a plasterer. In just a couple of days, the old wiring was carefully dismantled, while new cables were laid along the walls, trying to carefully open the surfaces. A plumber was invited to replace rusty pipes, and this resulted in part of the floor in the bathroom and kitchen being dug up. There was a smell of dust and lime everywhere, and tools were rattling. Emma threw herself into the process. She would rise at dawn, put on jeans and a shirt, pull her hair into a ponytail, and walk around the work front with Daniel, discussing the day's plan. It was deciding what wallpaper to order for the living room, or choosing a sample of molding suitable for replacing missing pieces. Michael called every evening, and she excitedly told him what was new. How they had taken down part of the wall in the dining room to build in a secret closet. How they had found newspaper clippings from the turn of the last century under the old wallpaper that had once been used to seal cracks. Michael was pleased by her enthusiasm, although he would occasionally interject, "Just don't overwork yourself, okay? Take care of yourself." Emma reassured, "Don't worry, I'm more of a lookout. I don't carry heavy things." Deep down, he was worried, of course. Strangers in the house, you never know, but Daniel inspired confidence. Besides, there was a neighbor nearby, Mr. Baker, an elderly man living 2 plots away, who promised to keep an eye on him and help if necessary. The neighbors, by the way, gradually got to know Emma. On the third day after Michael left, Mrs. Wilson, an elderly woman whose house was the closest on the road, dropped in. She brought a pie for the new neighbor and left her phone number in case you need help. Emma was touched by such a welcome and felt that she was slowly settling in. However, most of her time was occupied by the house and communication with Daniel. Constant work issues sometimes flowed unnoticeably into friendly conversations during breaks. For example, closer to midday, she and the team usually took a coffee break. Emma bought disposable cups, a can of instant coffee, and cookies for everyone in advance. The workers gratefully accepted the treats, laughed, and joked. Daniel often stayed a little longer, discussing city news, movies, and music with her in addition to work. It turned out that he and Emma had a lot in common. They both loved old jazz records once. Hearing Emma humming an Ella Fitzgerald tune, Daniel picked up the lyrics, and it turned out that he was a jazz fan too. After that, he brought her a flash drive with a selection of rare tracks, and Emma listened to them in the evenings while sorting out things or tidying up. Sometimes she caught herself thinking that she looked forward to these conversations. They were easy and interesting. Of course, Emma did not forget that Daniel was just a friend, a colleague in their business. He behaved impeccably correctly, no flirting, only respect and goodwill. But perhaps it was precisely this natural, relaxed, friendly atmosphere that did the trick. She found herself happily awaiting his arrival every day. Moreover, the volume of her participation gradually increased. If at first she only observed and occasionally gave instructions, then later she began to join in the work herself. She helped to tear off old wallpaper, wielding a spatula next to the workers under their approving encouragement. She painted the walls with primer before painting. Together with Daniel, they went to the city several times to choose materials, to a paint store where they discussed shades for a long time, laughing that you can go crazy from the number of samples, to a flea market, where Emma spotted a couple of old lamps and brass door handles. Daniel turned out to be an excellent advisor there too. He helped to bargain with the seller, determined by eye which thing was really antique and which was fake. The days flew by with such matters. Michael, for his part, was very busy with work. As promised, he tried to find time to come during the week, but so far it had not worked out. The office had entered a tense period before a deal with an important client, so they had to make do with phone calls and rare video calls. One such evening, about 2 weeks into the renovation, Emma was sitting on the porch, her legs stretched out wearily, when a video call came through. She picked up the phone and saw Michael on the screen. Behind him were the Manhattan skyscrapers. He must have been calling from his office because there were muffled sounds all around him. "Hello, darling." Michael smiled, but looked tired. "How are you?" "Hi." Emma put down her glass of cold tea and tried to drive the fatigue out of her voice. "Everything's fine. Are you late again?" Michael sighed heavily. "Yes, today, probably until midnight at least. The client is going crazy. We're redoing everything on the fly. And how are you? What did you do today? Emma turned the camera to show the front of the house. We've almost finished scraping off the old paint from the outside. Tomorrow, if the weather permits, we'll start priming. Can you imagine? The house looks white, but it turns out there's an even older layer of paint underneath pale yellow. Apparently, it used to be yellow. Interesting. Michael seemed genuinely interested. And you spent the whole day peeling off paint with the workers. Not all of it, but for about 2 hours, she admitted. It's even kind of meditative. You sit with a brush, revealing the history of the house layer by layer. Michael shook his head. Just be careful, there might be old lead paint there, you'll need a mask. We have respirators, Daniel brought them. Everything is under control, Emma reassured. At the mention of the architect's name, Michael's expression changed slightly, or did it seem so? He asked. You get along with him, right? Yes, very much, Emma smiled. He's a wonderful specialist and a pleasant person. Good to hear, Michael nodded, but his gaze became thoughtful. Listen, how about I get away for the weekend, this Friday? Emma asks. Really? That would be great. I missed you so much. Me too, Michael said softly. I'll try to get at least a couple of days off. I want to see you, the house, and make sure everything is going according to plan. Of course, everything is going well, she assured. You'll like how much has been done already. No doubt about it. Well, I have to go. They're waiting for me with the documents. Michael looked somewhere to the side. Take care of yourself, okay? Okay. Kisses. Emma blew a kiss to the camera. Kisses, he responded. The connection was lost. Emma stared at the darkened phone screen for a while, then sighed. How she missed him next to her. She caught herself thinking about Michael, despite being busy. How was he? Was he working too much? Was he eating on time? His tired face was haunting her. And here she was, enjoying the process of making her dream come true. Wasn't she being selfish? Maybe she shouldn't have talked him into moving. It was hard for him to travel. However, Emma drove these thoughts away. After all, Michael was happy with the house and was trying for her sake, and she was trying for his sake. Let's be patient for a little while, then everything will be fine, she thought. On Friday, as promised, Michael arrived late in the evening. Daniel had already left by then, and the workers even more so. Emma knew that her husband would be tired from the road, so she cooked dinner a quick pasta, opened a bottle of red wine, bought in advance. She put on her favorite blue dress, put on a little makeup. She wanted to meet him not in work clothes, but in beautiful ones. After all, 2 weeks of separation is almost like a new date. Michael entered the house around 9, hugged Emma from the doorway, lifting her up in his arms for a second. Finally home, he exhaled, closing his eyes with pleasure at feeling his wife in his arms. Michael, you're crushing me, she laughed, deftly dodging the overly tight squeeze. Go have dinner, hero of labor. How much has changed here? He looked around. The hall smelled of paint and wood. Parts of the walls had been stripped down to the wood, and here and there wires hung, covered in plastic boxes. The furniture had been pushed to the center under polyethylene. You can't see anything now. I'll show you everything tomorrow, Emma promised, leading him into the kitchen. Everything had been rearranged there too. The lower cabinets had their doors removed for painting. The stove had been moved. But Emma had managed to tidy up one corner, putting in a candle and 2 plates. Michael greedily attacked the dinner. He was really exhausted from the journey. In between, he asked what had been done. Emma told him everything in detail, showing him the before and after photos on her phone that she had taken especially for him. Here you see, the wires are new. And these are the windows we ordered, or rather, the frames. These are still standing, but we will replace them soon. Unfortunately, we couldn't leave them with the old glass. Michael nodded, but listened more for her voice. He himself was not very good at discerning these details. He looked at her more. Finally, putting down his empty plate, he reached out and covered her hand with his. Tell me better, how are you? Are you overtired? Emma smiled warmly. I'm fine. Sometimes I'm exhausted in the evening, of course, but it's a pleasant tiredness. You know, like being on some kind of construction team, she giggled. Such a sense of belonging, a team, and all that. Yeah, Michael narrowed his eyes slightly. The team, especially the team captain Daniel, right? He's not a captain, more of a partner, Emma shrugged, not catching the slight sarcasm. I wouldn't have done anything without him. He organized everything perfectly. Michael removed his hand and took the glass. That's for sure. Excellently organized. Emma noticed the change in tone. You seem unhappy? You don't like something? The husband perked up. No, no, I like everything. I just regret that I wasn't there, that's all. I'd like to be part of the process too. Oh, well, you work, she reassured him, leaning closer. Without your work, there wouldn't be a house. Besides, there's still finishing and furnishings to come. You'll take part in that too, I promise. He softened and touched a strand of her hair with his finger. Do you promise? Aha. She nodded and kissed his lips. Now let's go to bed. You're barely holding on. I'm ready to stay awake until the morning with you, he whispered, pulling her towards him. Perhaps they both didn't get enough sleep that night. They missed each other too much. On Saturday morning, Michael was not allowed to sleep well. The workers arrived at 8 in the morning. Emma had to be there. She quietly slipped out of bed, leaving her husband to finish sleeping. Throwing on a light robe, she went to meet the team. Michael woke up to the sound of footsteps and knocked somewhere below. For a moment he was disoriented. Then he remembered. He was at home. Repairs were underway. Grumbling, he stretched. His gaze fell on the empty space next to him. Emma had already gotten up. Of course, nothing was done here without her. Slightly hurt, he took a shower and got dressed. When I got down, I saw the following picture. Emma was standing on a stepladder near the stairs, wiping dust off the wall after sanding, and nearby, below, Daniel was holding the ladder, ensuring her. They were both laughing about something. Workers were walking around with tools. Michael felt an unpleasant pang in his chest. So that's how it was. He thought she tossed her hair slightly coquettishly, looking down at Daniel. Or was it his imagination? Good morning, he said loudly to get attention. Emma, hearing his voice, turned around happily. Hello, finally awake, sleepyhead. Come here, see what we're doing. Daniel looked up. Hello, Michael. It's good that you came. We just wanted to show you something. Michael tried to hide the hostility he himself did not expect to feel and came closer. Emma came down the stairs. Look, she began excitedly. Here in the hall on the walls under layers of paint, we found the remains of an old painting. She pointed to an area where a barely noticeable pattern was visible. See, a floral pattern? Michael took a closer look. Indeed, fragments of the drawing were visible under the peeling paint. Oh, interesting. We're thinking about restoring it partially or keeping it as a piece of history under glass, Daniel explained. Some owners keep a piece of the original as a keepsake. Like a museum piece, Emma added. Do you think it'll be cool? Michael shrugged. You know better. If you like it, I like it too. He said, you, on purpose, hinting at his and Daniel's collusion. But they didn't seem to get it or care. All day Michael tried to join in the work so as not to feel like a spare part. He helped move the boards, took the old rotten baseboards to the trash, went to the neighbors for a screwdriver of the right size when there wasn't enough tool. Emma only smiled gratefully, but most of the time she was busy with her own things, often next to Daniel. Michael had caught them talking in low voices a couple of times, but when he approached, the conversation died down or moved to neutral topics. They spent their lunch break together. Emma had made sandwiches for everyone in advance, and they ate sitting right on the steps of the porch. Michael sat next to his wife, but she talked more with Daniel and the foreman about the day's successes. By Saturday evening, Michael was physically and mentally exhausted. He was beginning to feel like an outsider among the close-knit team. Of course, no one had deliberately removed him, but that was how it turned out. He didn't know the intricacies, he was in the way of things. And to be honest, he wasn't particularly eager to do the repairs. He had been going there to relax with his wife, but instead he was toiling as a porter. Emma, in her element, seemed not to understand his disappointment. They decided not to do any work on Sunday. The team was resting. Daniel only stopped by in the morning for a couple of hours to check on a few things and give instructions for the next week. However, he had no plans to talk to Emma, realizing that they had a day off. After leaving, he left the couple alone. Michael suggested that Emma spend the day outside the house since they could take a break. She readily agreed. She herself wanted to escape the dusty atmosphere. They went to the beach, swam in the ocean, and had lunch in a nice restaurant overlooking the water. Gradually, the tension that had arisen in Michael began to subside. In a situation just the two of them, Emma behaved as before, gentle, caring, completely his. She chatted about her ideas for the bedroom, but also took an interest in his affairs, told him how the neighbors invited her to a barbecue next Saturday and would be happy to go if she had time. Michael listened, enjoying her voice, trying to drive away jealous thoughts. Only once did he cautiously touch on the topic that tormented him. "You spend a lot of time with Daniel. He's a good man, I see," Michael began as they lay on the beach, looking at the sky. Emma turned on her side, looking at him. "Yeah, good. And professional. So what?" Michael cleared his throat. "No, nothing. It's just, I'm glad you have company. But still, be careful." "What do you mean?" She raised herself slightly on her elbow. "Well, I don't know. You're an attractive woman, and he's a single man. You never know. I'm not saying that something will happen," he hastened to add. "It's just that sometimes people get close without noticing." Emma raised her eyebrows, then smiled and poked him in the side. "Hey, are you jealous or something?" Michael gave a tight smile. "No, but I'm worried, I guess. I'm far away, and you're here with him every day." Emma shook her head, running her hand over his chest soothingly. "Darling, stop it. Daniel is a colleague. Yes, we became friends, but nothing more. I love you, silly, and I really look forward to your every visit." He grabbed her hand and kissed her fingers. "I'm sorry I even said that. It was probably nerves." Of course, she lay back down, resting her head on his shoulder. "By the way, he doesn't give me a reason. He's very respectful, even too respectful." "Too much?" "Well, I mean, that's how he sometimes addresses formally Mrs. Harper. I've been asking him for a long time, just call me Emma, but he still uses the formal you at times. Funny." Michael said nothing. Something in the tone in which she said funny struck him again. A gentle mockery, almost. Tenderness? Or was it just his imagination again? That evening he had to go back. Saying goodbye was hard again. It seemed like he had just arrived and was already leaving. This time, however, he promised to come back in a week, and perhaps take a longer vacation when the bulk of the work was finished. Emma settled back into her routine, and things began to go as planned. Perhaps she had become a little more careful after the conversation on the beach, trying not to linger alone with Daniel after the workers had left, not to get too carried away in conversation when Michael called. But gradually, these things faded into the background again as work took over. In addition, by midsummer, and it was already the end of July, the heat had reached its peak and work was becoming difficult. Daniel sometimes shortened the day because it was difficult for people to swing a hammer all day at plus 35 degrees C and humidity of almost 90%. On such hot days, Emma and Daniel took lemonade breaks. They made a chilled drink and sat in the shade of the porch, discussing what else could be improved in the project. Sometimes they talked about personal things. He told her how much he liked the nature here. Daniel was interested in photography, especially landscape photography. He promised to show her his photos of local swamps with herons at sunset one day. She shared memories of life in noisy New York, how she got used to the measured southern way of life, how at first she was afraid of the night silence after the constant city noise. During one of these conversations, Daniel suddenly asked, "Emma, why did you and your husband choose Charleston? It seems you didn't have any friends here." Emma, stirring the melting ice in her glass, replied, "I sometimes ask myself that question," she smiled. "Probably just a spontaneous decision. I've always liked the South, and then this house turned up. Romance, you know. I understand, he nodded. It's bold, though. Not everyone would dare to transport their life 1,000 miles. Michael made this decision for me, she said quietly. It's probably harder for him. He loves you very much, it's obvious, Daniel responded softly. Emma looked at the architect. Is it really noticeable? Well, yes, and you him too, he added hastily, so as not to sound ambiguous. She lowered her eyes to the glass. Of course I love. It's just... What? He asked carefully. Emma shook her head. Nothing. Sometimes it just seems like we've started living separately. Different lives. I'm here, he's there. I'm worried that we'll drift apart. Daniel was silent for a moment, then said, Separation is a hard test. But true love must endure, right? That's right, she nodded, grateful for the support. I'm sorry, I don't know why I'm telling you all this. Don't apologize. I'm glad that you trust me, Daniel smiled. You know, I also had a long-distance relationship once. It didn't work out, but apparently there wasn't that real love there. Emma remembered. He was talking about a broken engagement. Perhaps it was her. I'm sorry, she said quietly. It's long gone, he waved it off, trying to make it look light. I'm just saying that I understand what it's like. Their eyes met for a moment, and something hung in the silence. Emma turned away, feeling a strange pang in her heart, either pity for him or an incomprehensible excitement from his warm concern. She hastened to change the subject back to work. But the seed had been sown. Something had changed deep inside her. Something had begun to stir, something she was afraid to name. Meanwhile, the renovation was nearing completion. They had completed the main construction work in early August. All that was left was painting the walls, polishing, and furnishing. Daniel began to come less often. His task was essentially completed, and more decorating efforts were needed. He gave Emma the contacts of good painters and a cabinet maker, but she decided that they could handle the painting themselves. They hired only 2 assistants for a couple of days to cover the facade. Emma wanted to paint the interior herself. She had loved to renovate walls since childhood, a strange hobby. One of those days, when most of the work was done, Daniel came to say goodbye, having actually completed the contract. In the morning, he brought all the necessary documents, certificates of completion, and the final bill, which turned out to be within their budget, which Michael was incredibly happy about. He explained to Emma that if anything needed to be done, call, but in general, his mission was accomplished. Emma felt both joy at completing a major milestone and a strange sadness that there would be no more daily meetings. She had gotten used to him being there every day. To celebrate, she offered Daniel tea and a pie baked by the caring Mrs. Wilson. They sat in the kitchen for the first time without rushing, when she didn't have to run and watch the workers. Thank you, Daniel, Emma said sincerely, raising her tea in a toast. You've given this house a new life and made my dream come true. Thank you for trusting me, he replied. I'm very pleased with the result. You and Michael did a great job, too. Michael, she smiled. He was more of a moral participant. But that's important, too, and financially, of course, he added with a grin. Just kidding. It's obvious that the house is important to him, too, for your sake. Emma looked down at her mug. Yes, he did it for me. Then you must be happy here, Daniel said softly. I'll try, she answered so quietly that he barely heard. She looked up. And you? What project are you planning next? I hope something interesting happens. Daniel shrugged. Yes, there are a couple. But after such an inspiring collaboration, I'm afraid regular work will be boring. Oh yeah, she chuckled. It'll probably be something cool. He looked at her carefully, as if memorizing her features. Then he decided. Can I be frank? Of course, Emma was a little surprised by the tone. I'll miss you, Daniel said bluntly. Our conversations, the ways we came up with ideas together. Emma felt her heart ache. She forced a smile. I'll miss you too. But we're not saying goodbye forever, are we? You'll come visit, right? If you allow me, he also tried to smile, but his eyes remained sad. Of course, she nodded emphatically. We'll have an official housewarming party. You'll be the first guest. And then you promised a tour of the city. I remember everything. Daniel responded more warmly. That's right. I'll take you on a tour of the Charleston back streets. They sat for a while, exchanging phone numbers, and had mostly communicated by email or in person to stay in touch. Then Daniel stood up. Okay, I have to run. Thanks for the tea and everything. Emma walked him to the door. Feeling a sudden impulse, she went over and hugged him goodbye. Informally, warmly, like a friend, like a loved one. He froze a little in surprise, but then carefully hugged her back. You are a wonderful person, Emma whispered, and a dear friend. You too, Daniel replied hoarsely. He quickly released her and took a step back. See you later, Emma. See you later, Daniel, she said quietly. He turned and walked out the door. Emma stood there, listening to his footsteps fade into the gravel, the car door slam, and the engine rumble. She suddenly realized that her hands were shaking slightly. Trying not to think too much, she cleared the cups from the table. But the thoughts kept popping up. Was this really it? She felt so. Easy with him. Could she live without this? Enough, you have a husband. Now the house is ready. A new chapter of life will begin, she said to herself. And yet tears came to her eyes. More precisely, one or two, she quickly wiped them away. She spent a few days alone, doing little things, arranging furniture, hanging curtains, decorating the rooms. Michael was supposed to come back in a week on vacation, and she wanted to prepare a surprise. A fully finished house, cozy, just like he dreamed. Emma tried to be happy, but it didn't work out very well. Her state of mind was strangely empty. She tried to explain it as the usual fatigue after a big deal, but it was more likely melancholy. She chalked it up to missing her husband. And then the day finally came when Michael arrived, this time for a 2-week vacation to spend together. Emma awaited his arrival with joy and excitement. She had done so much, she wanted to hear his delight, to see how happy he was. The house had really been transformed. The facade shone with fresh white paint with a creamy tint. The shutters were painted a noble dark blue. Inside, the walls were in soft pastel tones. The furniture was arranged. It smelled of wood and freshness. It turned out even better than she imagined. Michael arrived in the evening. Emma ran out to greet him as soon as the car stopped. He got out and froze in admiration. Wow, is this our house? He's the one, she laughed, throwing herself on his neck. Do you like it? Amazing, Michael breathed, hugging her. It's like new. No, better than new, such a color. Emma pulled him by the hand. Let's go inside quickly. I'll show you everything. She led him through each room, commenting enthusiastically on the details. Here they found old brickwork and left the exposed section as an accent wall. Here they ordered a vintage chandelier. There a floor was sanded and varnished. Michael listened with genuine amazement. Incredible. I would never have thought that it would turn out so great. You are a clever girl. It wasn't just me, she noted modestly. We all tried together. Yes, your architect is a great guy, Michael admitted, examining the stucco. And the team. He clearly appreciated the work now, seeing the result. Finally, they stopped in the living room, sitting down on a brand new, or rather, antique sofa bought in an antique store. Michael caught his breath. Now you can relax, and I admire. Emma pressed herself against him. Yes, now this is our home entirely. He kissed her. Thank you for making this dream come true. She suddenly felt uneasy. So much gratitude, praise, and she felt guilty about it, some kind of deception, because her thoughts. No, she had to leave the past weeks behind and rejoice. She smiled at her husband. We made it happen together, and now there's a new life ahead. Michael looked into her eyes with love. I love you, Emma. I love you, Michael, she answered, and it was true. They spent a wonderful evening, ordered food from a good restaurant to celebrate the end of the renovation, and drank champagne. Michael was in high spirits, joked, and turned on music. Everything as it should be, family happiness, comfort. If only there wasn't a shadow lurking deep inside Emma. She tried not to pronounce the name of this shadow, but for moments she caught herself imagining, if Daniel could see the result now, be happy, or sit with them. Chasing these thoughts away, she switched to her husband. The next few days were a quiet fairy tale. They were together at last, without any troubles, enjoying the house and each other's company. They went for walks, received the neighbors. Mrs. Wilson was invited for tea, Mr. Baker for a beer on the terrace, and went on an excursion around the neighborhood. Michael was calm and happy. Emma tried to seem the same. However, on about the fifth day of their vacation, Michael began to notice that sometimes his wife seemed thoughtful, lost in herself. This had never happened to her before, at least, he did not remember. One morning, waking up, he saw that Emma was already sitting by the window and looking at the ocean, although they usually liked to lie around together. He came up to her, hugged her from behind, kissed her neck. "What are you thinking about?" Emma winced slightly. "About nothing, just admiring the view." He sat down next to me. "You seem kind of sad. Is there something you don't like?" "No, everything's fine." She turned around, smiling too quickly. "Really, I guess I'm a little tired all at once." Michael stroked her shoulder affectionately. "Rest. Don't think about anything. We deserve a little laziness." "Yes, you're right." She kissed him and stood up. "I'll go make some coffee." He watched her go, feeling a vague uneasiness. Something was clearly bothering her, but she wasn't saying anything. Maybe a health problem she wasn't talking about, or dissatisfaction with him, but what kind? He decided not to press for now, to wait until she shared it herself. Halfway through the vacation, Michael suggested going to New York for the weekend to visit his parents and have a change of scenery. Emma agreed without much enthusiasm, but she didn't resist either. Perhaps she didn't want to leave her new home, just as they were settling in, but Michael wanted to brag about his stories to his family and have some fun. They flew away for 3 days. New York was noisy, crowded, a complete contrast. Emma felt uncomfortable. She had become unaccustomed to the metropolis in a few months. She preferred quiet Charleston now, which surprised her. Time passed normally with Michael's parents, although they grumbled that their son rarely visited. Michael's friends were invited to another dinner. They talked a lot about his work, not particularly interested in Emma's affairs. Home renovations were far from the circle of interests of these financiers. Returning, Emma felt relieved, again finding herself under the shade of oak trees near her house. But the trip played one role. There, in New York, she never thought about Daniel, strangely enough. Her head was filled with other things, and only when they returned, she suddenly caught herself thinking, "Oh, I haven't thought about him for a few days." That's it then. She felt better. That's good. It means she just needs to distract herself. Perhaps the recent thoughtfulness was just a recession after the stress. The last days of the vacation passed quietly. Michael, noticing Emma's improved mood, relaxed completely. On the last evening before his return to New York, they sat on the veranda, enjoying the warm night. Michael held his wife's hand. "It's a pity that I have to go again." "Uh-huh," she said quietly. Her soul was scratching, to be alone again. "But maybe I'll be able to switch to remote work completely soon," Michael said thoughtfully. "The management is considering this option after all. I've proven a lot over these months." "That would be wonderful," Emma responded sincerely. "Yes, we'll see. I don't want to predict." They were silent for a moment. Michael said, "I'll wait until the weekend to fly back again. Or maybe you'll fly to me for a couple of days. New York misses you." Emma shook her head. "I don't want to yet. You know, I wasn't very comfortable there. Sorry." "I understand. I just thought maybe you'd like a change of scenery sometimes." "Well, whatever." He doesn't blame her, and thank goodness for that. It was time to go to bed, an early flight tomorrow. When he left, a new stage began for Emma, living in a renovated house, but without construction and fuss, alone with herself. For a couple of days, she enjoyed just relaxing, reading on the veranda, and going to the beach. Then she felt bored. What to do? She decided to sit down to write an article about the restoration. Perhaps such material could be published in a local magazine. With the enthusiasm inherent in all her projects, she spent several days scribbling text, inserting before and after photos. Michael approved over the phone. Come on, start a career as a journalist designer. While working, she needed to clarify a couple of historical facts about the house. She thought, who knows better than Daniel? But after some hesitation, she decided not to bother him. She would try to find it herself. She dug through the notes he gave her. Everything was there. At the same time, she realized that they had not communicated since that farewell. More than 2 weeks had passed. Maybe it was better this way, she thought. But fate decreed otherwise. One Saturday, Emma, going out to the gate to get the mail, saw someone walking along the road to her. Squinting from the sun, she recognized the figure Daniel. Her heart did a somersault. He waved his hand from afar. "Hi, Emma," he called, coming closer. "Daniel." She tried to appear calm. "I didn't expect." "What brought you here?" He smiled, wiping the sweat from his forehead. It was a hot day. "I dropped in to see Mr. Baker. He asked me to look at his shed, which was leaning to one side. I decided to pass by in case you were home. I hope I'm not disturbing you." "No, no, what are you saying?" She hurried. "I'm always happy. Come in, let's have some lemonade or something stronger," Emma joked. Daniel walked into the yard, looking around the house. "Wow, how beautiful. I haven't seen the facade after painting. It shines." Emma smiled proudly. Yes, it turned out to be a gem. "And the garden is tidy, there are flowers," he noted, pointing to her flower beds in front of the porch. Emma got into gardening a bit the other day to spruce up the yard, and Daniel complimented her, which was nice. They sat on the terrace, where there was shade. She poured him some iced tea. For a few minutes, both were awkwardly silent, not knowing where to begin. Then he spoke. "How are you, Emma? How is life after the renovation?" "Oh, it's boring," she admitted, putting down her glass. "I'm used to the action, but it's okay, I'm resting." "And Michael?" "He went to work, was here for a couple of weeks of vacation. He really liked everything, by the way. He asked me to say hello to you if I see you." She lied to sound appropriate. "Michael didn't ask directly, but it's better to say it this way." Daniel nodded. "Nice to meet you. He's a great guy." "Yes," Emma laughs. Silence again. "You said you went to see Baker? What happened to him?" she asked. "No, it's a small thing. The shed has sunk. He thought the foundation needed to be repaired. But there's just a post that needs to be ripped up. I showed him. He can handle it himself." Daniel waved his hand dismissively. "I see. It's good to have an architect next door," she smiled. "Well, I'm glad to help. He's a nice old man. He treated me to lemonade, too." Daniel chuckled. "I told you, it's boring without you. I go to visit old people." Emma gave a false, reproachful look. "Oh, poor thing. What are you working on now?" He shrugged. "The project of cottages outside the city. Boring. Standard houses. I might also take on the reconstruction of the old theater. That would be more interesting." "Great," she said. The conversation seemed to be feeling its way through the waters. Finally, Daniel decided to get to the main point. "Emma, honestly, I dropped by on purpose. I just wanted to see you." Her heart sank. He continued. "I know, I promised to keep my distance and all that, but I couldn't stand it. Sorry if this is too much." She was silent, not knowing what to answer. He sighed. "I just wanted to know if everything was okay with you. I was worried." "Why were you worried?" she asked quietly. He looked straight ahead. "Because I saw in your eyes that not everything was calm inside. You can deny it, and maybe I'm wrong, but I don't know. I feel it." Emma lowered her head. "It's okay, Daniel. Really, don't worry." He reached out and touched her palm, which was lying on the table. "If suddenly you need to talk, or just talk it out, I'm here." His hand, warm, covered her fingers. Emma did not pull away. How much she had dreamed of feeling his closeness again these weeks, and now. But this was wrong. She carefully removed her palm and stood up. "You're a good friend. Thank you." But Daniel also stood up, understanding the hint of departure. He spoke with difficulty. "But nothing. Sorry, I was being stupid." She looked into his eyes. Not nonsense. It's just that I'm married, he finished softly for her. Yes. The tension hung thick as syrup in the heat. He wanted to say more, and she wanted to say more, but they were silent. Finally, he nodded. Got it. Okay, Emma. Take care. He turned to leave. Emma, suddenly afraid that they would be separated again for an unknown amount of time, blurted out. Daniel. He turned around, hope flashing across his face. Yes. Maybe, you could stay for dinner? She was surprised by her own words, but it was too late. Daniel hesitated. I don't want to cause any inconvenience. No inconvenience, she said quickly. Just friendly, okay? Let's talk, have dinner. He hesitated, but the desire to stay prevailed. If you are sure. I'm sure, she smiled bravely. So Daniel stayed. Emma cooked a light dinner pasta with vegetables and found a bottle of white wine. They ate, trying not to talk about dangerous topics. They laughed at memories of the funny things about the renovation, like how a worker fell through the attic floor with his foot, and argued about the actors in a recently released film that they both watched. It was as if they went back a couple of months when they worked together. Only the atmosphere was more intimate now. No one around, evening, the semi-darkness of the kitchen, a candle they had not yet fully installed electricity. They used candles sometimes for coziness. The wine had a relaxing effect. When dinner was over, Emma was clearing away the dishes, Daniel helping. At one point, their hands touched over the sink. Emma didn't pull away right away. He stepped closer, standing behind her, not touching, but she could feel his warmth. Her heart began to pound. She knew she was on the brink of an abyss. Emma, he whispered almost inaudibly. She closed her eyes. She wanted to say no, but her lips said, yes? He didn't finish. He gently moved a strand of hair from her neck and kissed the soft skin under her ear. Emma let out a quiet sigh. The world spun. She turned to face him, met his gaze, full of passion and pain at the same time, and could not resist. She reached out and touched his lips with hers. The kiss was timid at first, as if they were afraid to scare each other off. Then it became greedy, demanding from a long abstinence of feelings. Daniel hugged her tightly, pressing her to himself. She responded with no less ardor. In his head, he screamed, "It is forbidden." But the body stretched, the soul sang and cried at the same time. They kissed for an unknown amount of time. Then Daniel whispered, pulling away for a moment. Sorry, I guess. Don't say anything, she whispered back and found his lips again. There were no excuses or common sense now. There was only a growing passion that had been kept bottled up for too long. Perhaps if the phone had rung or thunder had crashed at that moment, something would have interrupted them, they would have stopped. But the house was silent, the night hid them. Daniel picked her up, still kissing her, and carried her up the stairs. Emma didn't resist. In the bedroom, lit only by moonlight, they merged into one, shedding their clothes and doubts. It was a night of love forbidden, passionate, filled with happiness and bitterness at the same time. Emma gave herself completely, as if satisfying a long hunger. Daniel was gentle and at the same time persistent, as if he wanted to remember every part of her. They whispered tender and desperate words to each other, not thinking about the consequences. Only towards morning, when the first light of dawn began to break through the window, Emma woke up from her slumber, realizing what she had done. She was lying in Daniel's arms, her head on his chest. He was also awake, stroking her shoulder. What have we done? She whispered barely audibly, tears welling up. Daniel hugged her tighter. SHH, don't think now. But how can one not think? She cheated on her husband. All principles, promises crossed out at once. And she loves Michael, she really does. How can that be? She began to cry quietly. Daniel stroked her hair, whispering apologies. It's my fault. No, I wanted it myself, she exhaled through her tears. Oh, God. He turned her towards him, wiping her wet cheeks with his palms. Listen, Emma, I won't make any excuses. But know this, for me, this is more than just a casual relationship. I love you. Emma stopped sobbing in surprise. He loved her. She looked at him in shock. Daniel continued, determined. Yes, I fell in love with you, probably, since those days of renovation. I fought with myself because I knew you were not free. But now. He paused, watching her digest his confession. Emma looked away. It's impossible. It shouldn't. I know, he said bitterly. But since it happened, I had to tell you. Even if now you throw me out and don't want to see me. She was silent. A storm raged inside her. I love Michael, but I'm fine with Daniel. Do I love him too? No, it can't be. She won't allow it. A minute later, she rushed out of bed and began feverishly collecting her scattered clothes. You better leave. Now. Daniel stood up and threw on his pants. Emma. Please, Daniel, she said firmly, hiding her trembling. Don't say anything. Just go. He bowed his head, understanding her condition. He quickly dressed. At the threshold of the bedroom, he turned around. If you want to talk later, or... He didn't finish, seeing her cold gaze. Without a word, he left the room. A minute later, Emma heard the slam of the front door downstairs. Daniel was gone. She sat down on the bed, buried her face in her hands, and burst into tears, giving vent to feelings that she couldn't splash out in front of him. In her soul, horror, guilt, pain, but somewhere in the corner also melancholy from the fact that she drove him away. So Emma Harper crossed the line and found herself trapped in her own secret. Back to Michael. In the morning, Emma was reeling from what had happened. He was far away in New York, unsuspecting. He had been truly happy for the last few weeks. The house was finished, his wife was happy, everything was going as it should. His job had finally officially put him on a schedule that allowed him to work remotely most of the time. He was already planning to move almost permanently to Charleston by the fall, coming into the office only once a month. The future seemed bright, but there was still something that was bothering him, albeit on the periphery of his consciousness: Emma's mood. During the vacation, he had noticed that she was not always frank, that she was hiding something, or so it seemed to him. Perhaps she had some kind of blues that she did not want to talk about. Michael wondered, maybe a health problem that she was keeping silent about? Or dissatisfaction with him, but what kind? He decided not to press for now, to wait maybe it would pass on its own. However, the chain of strange things began soon after his return, that is, soon after the night Emma cheated on him, which, of course, Michael did not yet know. On Thursday evening, after finishing a meeting, Michael decided to call his wife. It was about 9 in the evening, the time they usually talked. But she did not answer his call. Strange, usually she always answers or calls back quickly. He wondered if she had gone to a neighbor or gone to bed early. Lately, she said that she walked a lot and got tired in the sun. He waited half an hour, tried again, same result. Wrote an SMS, "Hi, honey. Is everything okay? I called, but you didn't answer. Love you." There was no answer for almost an hour. Michael was worried. What if something happened? But he decided not to panic. You never know. She could have fallen asleep in front of the TV. Although usually she would at least scribble a text message. An hour and a half later, a message arrived. "Hi, honey. Sorry, I forgot my phone in the car. Didn't hear you. Everything's okay. I was watching a movie at my neighbor's. It's late. I'm going to bed. I'll call tomorrow. Love." Michael breathed a sigh of relief. Nothing to worry about. But there was a bad feeling. Emma had never done this before, forget her phone for a long time. But it happens. What can you do? The next day, he called her back at lunchtime. He was not there, and she didn't pick up again. Then she called herself and cheerfully apologized. "It was noisy in the store. I didn't hear it." He accepted the explanation again, even though it was scratching inside. Then, over the next week, there were a couple more times when she was unavailable or responded with a delay. Nothing critical, but Michael began to feel uneasy. Coincidentally, this was the period after her betrayal, and Emma, having a hard time dealing with it, was clearly behaving unusually. Michael decided that he would definitely go the following weekend to see for himself that everything was fine. He was impatient to see his wife, and at the same time to dispel the suspicions that he had not yet given a clear form to. He told Emma midweek, "I'll probably fly in on Friday night for the weekend." She greeted the news, not as joyfully as I expected. Didn't she miss him? Of course, she said, "Great, I'll wait," but was there tension in the voice, or did he imagine it? Michael arrived in Charleston on Friday night and took a cab home. On the way, he noticed that he was a little nervous. Was he being paranoid? He cursed himself for being stupid. Emma was a faithful, loving wife. Why was he suddenly suspicious? Just because of a couple of missed calls? "You just love her too much," he said to himself, getting out of the car at the gates of his home. Emma met him at the door and hugged him. Everything seemed normal, but Michael felt that she was tense. After warm greetings, they went inside. Michael noticed something strange from the doorway, a slight foreign smell, a thin trail of men's cologne, definitely not his own. It seemed to have faded, barely perceptible. Maybe it seemed so. He said nothing. "I'm so glad you came," Emma said, leading him into the living room. "I thought you couldn't make it." "I'm glad too," Michael replied with a smile, watching her. She was paler than usual, with dark circles under her eyes. "Did she sleep badly?" he asked. "You look good. Maybe a little tired. How are you sleeping? Is everything okay?" Emma turned away, straightening some magazines on the table. "Huh? Yeah, I'm fine," she said quickly. "It's just the heat that's a little tiring." In the living room, Michael noticed that there were two mugs on the table, one empty, the other with unfinished tea or coffee. No matter, but why two? Before he could ask, Emma caught herself. "Oh, my neighbor came by yesterday. We were drinking tea, and I didn't clean up." She quickly grabbed the mugs and carried them into the kitchen. Michael stood, looking around the room. Something was wrong. Or was he really overreacting? The mugs were a trifle. Maybe it was the neighbor. The smell. Maybe a worker had come in. Although the renovation was already finished. The evening passed normally, but Michael did not give up trying to understand Emma's state. She tried to be cheerful, as always, but as soon as the conversation died down, she immediately went into herself. Her gaze became detached, and she avoided prolonged eye contact. The night was different too. Emma showed less passion. Michael felt as if she was a little distant, although she tried to please. He fell asleep with a heavy feeling. The next morning, while Emma was still asleep, Michael decided to get up early and make them some coffee. He went down to the kitchen and started looking for coffee. While searching, he came across something strange. There was an empty bottle of wine on top of the trash can. They hadn't drunk wine yesterday, and judging by the date on the cork, the wine had been opened 2 or 3 days ago, not yesterday. Had Emma been drinking without him? Maybe she had invited someone. He also noticed 2 wine glasses in the sink, among the dishes, unwashed. Next to them was a plate with dried traces of pasta. 2 glasses, 2 plates. So she definitely had a guest. Of course, it could have been a neighbor, and why not? But Mrs. Wilson's neighbor would hardly drink wine, especially in the evening. She was an old woman. Did she come out in the evening? Friend or girlfriend? Emma doesn't seem to have any close friends here, other than her older neighbors. She didn't mention any new acquaintances. Suddenly, an unpleasant thought. Maybe with Daniel? This little worm, already buried, poked its head out again. The architect. Yes, he was almost her only young acquaintance here. But after the renovation was completed. Wait, did they talk any more? Emma didn't mention him much after that. He decided to check it out carefully at breakfast. When they were sitting at the table, he asked casually, "You said Mrs. Wilson came to visit? When?" Emma, busy with her toasts, froze for a second. Yeah, a couple of days ago. You remember, the mugs were left on the table," she tried to joke. "I'm just wondering how she is. I'll have to invite her over for a glass of wine sometime," Michael said carefully. Emma winced slightly. "Yes, you can. Although she doesn't drink much, only tea." Michael nodded, pretending to just chat. So she hadn't been drinking wine with Mrs. Wilson. Maybe with her neighbor Baker. But 2 glasses meant a man and a woman. Or a friend, but Emma didn't have many young friends. The candidate who had been haunting him was Daniel. Michael had recently overcome these suspicions, but now the facts were coming to him. He remembered their visit when the renovation was going on. The smell of someone else's perfume had been there too. It had bothered him then, yes. Michael knew he might be making it up, but he decided to take a closer look this weekend. On Saturday afternoon, while Emma was gardening, Michael walked around the house by himself, as if for the first time. His gaze searched for every little detail, and he found an unfamiliar silver lighter was found on a shelf in the hallway closet. He doesn't smoke, Emma doesn't either, so it's someone else's. He doesn't remember any smoking friends. There was a third toothbrush in the bathroom in a glass for toothbrushes. He froze. They had two. Where did the third one come from? Judging by the look, it was a man's, big, like new. Who left it? Really? Michael replaced the toothbrush, his hands shaking slightly. Maybe she had bought a new one for herself. No, she had a pink one, he had a green one, and this blue one was not from their set. He remembered her once saying that they should buy a new toothbrush to replace the old one. But why keep a third one? His heart was beating loudly. He began to seriously believe something was happening, or had already happened. The most obvious were the lighter and the brush proof, albeit indirect. He returned to Emma with a stony face, but did not show the find. Not yet. That evening, he suggested, "Let's have a little grill. I bought some steaks. We can call Mr. Baker, since we wanted to." Emma replied, "Today, I'm so tired somehow. Maybe we can just have dinner together." He agreed, but noted that she used to be more sociable. In general, on Saturday, he noticed that she was nervous, flinched when the phone beeped, and hid the screen. A couple of times, she went into another room to answer a message. He asked who was writing. She said, "Mom wanted to know how things were going here." Maybe. On Sunday morning, Michael announced, "Can you imagine? My business trip fell through this week, so I'm free all day. I think I'll stay here next week, work remotely. Why fly there?" Emma reacted too harshly. "For the whole week? Oh," and she fell silent. "What, you don't want to?" Michael frowned. "Oh no, of course I want to. I just wasn't mentally prepared." She laughed nervously. "Great, stay," Michael said. "Okay, then I'll go to the grocery store and stock up on food for the week." Emma volunteered to go with him, but he insisted, rest. In general, he needed time alone to think. In the store, wandering between the shelves, he analyzed. The collection of small items was already too much. If someone had told me from the outside, the wife was alone, became friends with a young man, the husband was leaving, many would have suspected betrayal. But he didn't want to believe it. Emma wasn't like that, he thought. And yet, even good people change. It happens, especially if he himself didn't pay enough attention, was often absent. Michael felt hot and cold. What if it was true? What to do then? He didn't know. For now, I've decided to continue collecting facts. He'll stay for a week and keep an eye out. Maybe he'll see something. When he returned, he found Emma hastily writing something on her phone. When she heard his car, she shuddered and hid her mobile phone. It was bad. That evening, he checked the toothbrush again. It was gone. Emma must have noticed and put it away so he wouldn't see. She might have guessed that the third extra item was a giveaway. Now Michael was sure she was hiding something, most likely a connection with another, and the main candidate was Daniel. He knew in his head that before throwing accusations or deciding a fate, he had to know for sure. He needed direct proof, to catch someone in a lie, to see, to hear. You have to control yourself and figure everything out quietly. On Monday, Michael pretended to be very busy working remotely. He sat with his laptop all day. Emma was busy with her own things, tense. It was obviously unusual for him to be home during the week. Her phone rang several times. She said, "The neighbor is asking for a pie recipe," or "Mom again," but answered briefly, trying not to chat in front of him. In the afternoon, Michael said he might have to go to the office for a couple of days after all the boss was calling. He spoke uncertainly, but he noticed a flicker of relief in Emma's eyes. She said, Well, if it's necessary, it's necessary. It seemed normal, but she agreed too easily. He left the question open, and by the evening, he seemed to receive confirmation. Yes, I need to fly out tomorrow afternoon for a couple of days. Emma showed a slight sadness, but without much protest. Michael has a mind of his own. I'll pretend to leave and then check if my lover shows up. He made arrangements with a friend in New York so that if anything happened, he would cover for her, for example, by telling Emma on the phone that Michael was in the office. On Tuesday morning, Michael packed his suitcase, said goodbye warmly, and sat down as if he were going to the airport. In fact, he left his car at the supermarket, and from there he took a taxi back quietly to the neighborhood. It was only 10 in the morning. He had foreseen it in advance. If the lover existed, he could come either during the day, since Michael was not there, or in the evening. So, just in case, Michael rented a room from Baker's neighbor for the day under the pretext. They are repairing the air conditioner. I can work there because it is noisy at home. The old man readily agreed to let him in. From the Baker house, across the property, you could see part of their mansion. It wasn't perfect because there were trees in the way, but you could see the driveway. Nothing happened before lunch. Emma went out into the yard, pottered around in the garden, and looked normal. Michael even felt uneasy. Maybe he had done all this in vain. Suspicions could ruin everything. However, closer to 1 o'clock in the afternoon, a car pulled up to the house. Michael's heart jumped. A blue Volvo station wagon. He seemed to have seen it before. Yes, Daniel drove an old blue Volvo. The car door slammed, and a man stepped out. It was unclear from this distance, but it looked like it was him. And yes, Emma ran out onto the porch to meet him. She threw herself on his neck. Michael felt like he had been punched in the stomach. He saw two people locked in an embrace for a few seconds. He lost his breath. Then they disappeared into the house. All doubts were shattered. Here it is. The betrayal is obvious. For the first time in his life, Michael felt real rage, cold and burning. He wanted to rush in there and, kill. He had to deal with this feeling. He forced himself to sit for half an hour, thinking. Boiling water flooded his mind, but he tried to plan. If he just burst in now, there would be a scandal, a fight possible. But maybe it would be better to catch them at the scene of the crime for greater effect, although one hug was already enough. Still, he decided he would come in unexpectedly, see what they were doing. If he caught them in bed, that was a sure thing. He left his neighbor's house and moved silently toward his own. The kitchen door was closed, but he knew where the spare key was under a flower pot. He carefully unlocked the back door. It was the door behind the kitchen. He entered quietly. The house was silent. Only muffled voices could be heard upstairs in the bedroom. He crept into the hall, his heart pounding, his temples buzzing. I climbed the stairs to the second floor, trying to walk on my toes, but the steps could creak. I heard a slight creak and froze. The voices from the bedroom became clearer. Emma and Daniel. Michael crept further to the bedroom door, which remained slightly open. He looked in. The image caught his eye. Emma was sitting on the bed, wearing only a thin robe, and Daniel was standing next to her, half sideways to the door, pulling on his shirt. They had obviously just. Emma spoke excitedly. I can't do this anymore, Daniel. This is madness. We have to finish. Daniel replied. I know, but every time he leaves, we can't resist. I can't do this anymore either. It's painful. Michael had had enough. He pushed the door wide open. Sorry to interrupt. They both started and turned around. Emma screamed, clutching the hem of her robe. Daniel turned pale, buttoning his buttons with trembling hands. Michael, Emma breathed out as if she had turned to stone. Michael stepped over the threshold, looking at them with icy anger. Yes, Michael. Hello, dear. Didn't expect me so early. And you, Mr. Architect, weren't expecting me either. Daniel retreated, raising his hands in a pleading gesture. Michael, listen. Shut up, Michael barked. I don't care what you explain. Emma slid off the bed, trying to cover herself with her robe, and burst into tears. Michael, What? What are you going to tell me? He glared at her, full of fury. Do you think I'm a blind idiot? I know everything. Emma just sobbed. Forgive me. Forgive me. Michael wasn't moved by her tears now. It was too painful. He turned his anger completely on Daniel and came up close to him. I trusted you. I let you into the house. And you scoundrel. Daniel retreated. Michael, this is... What? Love? The husband smiled bitterly. It's like a movie. An architect seduces his bored wife. Bravo. Emma sobbed. It's not his fault. Of course, Michael shouted. It's not your fault either, is it? It's my fault, I guess. I didn't pay enough attention. No, she whispered. It's me. I'm to blame. Her pitiful appearance softened his tone a little. You're right about that. Yalma betrayed me. Daniel stood there dejectedly, not trying to explain anything. He knew he was guilty. Michael again turned to him coldly. I appreciate you not trying to make excuses. It's best for you to leave now, while I'm still in control. Daniel looked at Emma. She was silent, only tears flowed. He lowered his head. Emma, forgive me. She didn't answer. Daniel walked slowly towards the exit. As he passed Michael, he muttered, I'm truly sorry. Get lost, Michael snapped, clenching his fists. The architect came out. A minute later, the sound of his footsteps on the stairs was heard, then the slam of the front door. Michael was left alone with Emma. She stood by the bed, trembling, not daring to look at her husband. There was a deathly silence, interrupted by her sobs. Michael paced the room, struggling with a million emotions: rage, hurt, pain, disappointment. Finally, he stopped. How much? He asked hoarsely. Emma raised her red eyes. How much? How many times? How long have you had this? He grimaced as he asked the question. She closed her eyes. A few weeks. All this time after the renovation, right? He remembered. So when he left after vacation, they slept together. Just think. Emma nodded slightly. So, while I was working hard, dreaming of returning to you, you are here with him. He waved his hand in despair. Why, Emma? I loved you, provided for you, tried. Did I ever offend you in any way? No, you're good, she sobbed. It's not because of you. Why? Enlighten me, he smiled bitterly, feeling his soul being torn apart. Emma hesitated. I don't understand it myself. Everything started spinning. I didn't want to. You didn't want to, Michael repeated loudly. But you did. Did you at least think about me when you lay down with him? Of course not. She remained silent, hanging her head in shame. Michael snapped. How could you, Emma? We were happy. I did everything for you, this move. Damn this house, if it made you so happy. Emma raised her head. Don't bring it home. Who? Oh, I have myself to blame, that's for sure. He laughed nervously. You know, it's probably true. I shouldn't have left you alone. I'm an idiot. She quietly tried to object. No, you are not guilty of anything. Of course, it's all you, he said angrily. You destroyed us, Emma. These words made her cry even harder. Sorry, sorry. Michael looked at her in tears. Despite his anger, his heart was pierced by pity. After all, he still loved her. But betrayal cannot be erased. He couldn't stand to see it anymore. Michael turned and walked out of the bedroom, stomping loudly down the stairs. Emma rushed after him, pulling her robe tighter. Michael, wait, please listen. He stopped at the bottom, at the exit. Listen to what? That you love us both and can't choose, he spat. She shook her head. No, I love you. Him, it was like an obsession. I wasn't going to leave, it was a mistake. Error? Wrong for a few weeks? He shook his head in horror. At least don't lie to yourself. Emma looked down again, like a guilty child. I can't say anything in response, except that I'm infinitely sorry. He sighed and ran his hand over his face. Okay, let's leave it. Let's talk about the future. You probably understand why I left then. Of course I understand, she whispered. I didn't want to make a rash decision rashly, but so much time has passed, and I'm still not sure what to do. Her heart sank. You are inclined to. I don't know, Emma, he shook his head. Part of me is screaming, leave and get a divorce. The other part, can't let you go. A glimmer of hope flashed in her eyes, but she asked cautiously, which part is stronger now? Michael looked at her intently. I won't lie, I don't trust him, and getting him back is a huge task, and not only yours, but mine as well. I'm not sure we can handle it. I'm ready for any work, Emma said hotly. I know I've broken your trust, but if you give me a chance, I'll prove my loyalty all my life. Michael silently took the cup, took a sip to buy time. Then he asked, and he? Do you love him? Emma closed her eyes in pain. No. What happened was, it was passion, infatuation. I thought I was in love, but when everything came to light, I realized that the main feeling of my whole life is for you. He chuckled quietly. It's strange to hear this after everything. I know, she whispered, but it's true. It's all over with him. I don't talk to him, and I won't. He left town, I think. You didn't see him again. Michael himself didn't understand why he was asking, because he saw for himself that she hadn't met him since that day. No, she said firmly. I told him myself not to show up. Michael leaned back in his chair. The silence stretched on, the clock ticked. Emma forgot about tea and cake, just waited for the verdict. Finally, Michael said, I decided so. I'm not ready to forgive and forget right away, it's impossible. And probably it will be hard for me to be around you for some time. But I want to try to save our marriage, because... He fell silent, then finally said, because I still love you. Emma couldn't hold back a sob. She covered her mouth with her hand, tears streaming down. Michael, darling. He raised his palm, stopping the flow. Wait, let me finish. I agree to try, but on one condition. We go to a family psychologist. We need help, otherwise we won't cope. Emma nodded quickly. Yes, of course. As you say, I thought about it too. I read how people restored relationships after, things like that. Still, Michael looked around. I am not sure I can live in this house again. There is too much here. We'll sell it, she blurted out. If you want, we'll go to the ends of the earth, really. Michael raised his eyebrows in surprise. What about your dream? Emma smiled sadly. Home is nothing without you. If it has become the scene of our grief, then it is not needed. Michael felt a deep sense of guilt for a second. He, too, had been part of the decision to buy the house, to leave her alone. But he kept silent about his contribution, not the time. Let's not rush to sell, he said, but maybe a change of scenery would be good. For now, let's live for a while with my parents or in New York. I don't know. We'll decide. Emma nodded in agreement. She would agree to anything, just to have him by her side. Michael looked at her intently. Do you understand that everything will not be the same tomorrow or in a month? It will be hard, and for me too. Sometimes I will lose my temper, maybe get angry. I know, she answered quietly. I'm ready to accept everything. Okay, he exhaled, as if he had made a final decision. Then we'll try. Emma stood up timidly and came closer. Can I hug you? There was such a pleading look in her eyes that Michael couldn't resist. He stood up too. There was a moment of confusion, then he pulled her towards him. Emma burst into tears on his chest. Thank you. Thank you. I won't let you down, I promise. Michael stroked her back, feeling the warmth of her body and her familiar scent melt the last ice inside him. He knew they had a long road ahead of them, perhaps years. But now, holding his wife in his arms, he knew he had made the right decision to at least try. Because love was still alive, and it was worth fighting for. They stood there for a long time until Emma's tears dried. Finally, she pulled back a little and looked into his face. I love you, Michael. He touched her wet cheek with his palm. I love you too, Emma. She reached out to him, smiling through her tears, and he leaned in. Their lips met in a kiss, tentative as the first time. It was a sign to both of them. All was not yet lost. Outside, A cold autumn wind tore the last leaves from the trees and swirled them over the empty beach. But inside the old house on the south coast, a spark of hope was glimmering. The Harpers didn't know what would happen next. Would the wound heal completely, or would the scar remain forever? But one thing was clear. They were entering a new chapter of their lives together, where there would be no more secrets, and therefore a chance to regain their lost happiness. Exactly 1 year has passed. It's October again on the calendar, but a different one, brighter and calmer for the Harper family. They've been through a lot this year. They've attended dozens of family therapy sessions together, had many heart-to-heart talks, cried and laughed, and learned to understand each other again. It wasn't easy, but with each passing month, the wound has gradually healed. Michael and Emma decided to move out of the old mansion. They put the house up for sale in the spring and found buyers who were enchanted by its history and atmosphere. The Harpers said goodbye to the house without much regret. It had absorbed too much pain. Instead, they moved to a small, cozy cottage on the outskirts of Charleston. The new house was much more modest, but Michael joked that it was for the better. Fewer rooms, easier to keep track of each other. Emma smiled at these words with a little sadness, knowing how much was left unsaid. Over time, Michael transitioned to working remotely almost entirely. Now he spent only rare short business trips to New York, and the rest of the time he worked from home or a co-working space in Charleston. Emma, on the advice of a therapist, took up volunteer work. She helped the local historical society restore the archives of old houses. This activity allowed her to atone for what she believed was part of her guilt and feel useful again. Daniel Richardson never appeared in their lives again. Emma heard from mutual friends that he had moved to another state, accepted a major project in New Mexico. In her heart, she wished him happiness, but she understood that their paths had diverged forever. Michael had never said his name out loud for the entire year, and she hadn't mentioned it either. It was their unspoken agreement, not to return to that nightmare without need. True, at one of the therapy sessions, Michael did say everything that was hurting him about Daniel, about the betrayal. Emma only listened, without trying to justify herself. After that conversation, it seemed that the black lump of accusations stuck in Michael's chest had diminished a little. Today, they decided to have a special day. Exactly 1 year ago, on October 15th, Michael returned to give their marriage a second chance. Now it's a new date of sorts on their family calendar, Resurrection Day, as Michael joked. In the morning, they drove to the ocean, walked along the deserted beach, holding hands. Then they went to church, where, alone, sitting in the back pew, they quietly thanked fate for the opportunity to fix everything. In the evening, already at home, Emma set the table for dinner by candlelight. Michael brought a bottle of champagne from the pantry. "I think our occasion deserves some bubbles," he smiled, holding up the bottle. Emma laughed. "You know, I get drunk quickly from champagne." "All the better," he winked. "It'll be more fun." They sat down at the table. The menu was simple: baked fish, salad, and fresh bread. But for them, the most important thing was the atmosphere and each other's company. Michael poured sparkling wine into glasses. "Would you like to make a toast?" Emma asked softly. Michael twirled his glass thoughtfully, watching the bubbles play. "Let's do it together," he suggested. "Let's just drink to our new life, to what we could do." "We did it," she echoed and lightly clinked her glass against his. The champagne tickled her palate pleasantly. Emma was indeed a little tipsy from a couple of sips, or from her own happiness. She looked at Michael in the flickering candlelight. He looked calm, a little sad, but he smiled warmly at her. This smile had cost her many months of work on herself and the relationship, and she was infinitely grateful to see it again. "What are you thinking about?" Michael asked, noticing her thoughtfulness. Emma reached across the table and carefully touched his palm. "About how I love you, and how grateful I am that you didn't leave forever then." Michael turned her hand over and intertwined his fingers with hers. "There were moments when I thought I couldn't, but every time, love stopped me." He paused, then added, "I am grateful to you too, for your patience and for not giving up." Emma felt a treacherous moisture in her eyes. "I would never give up, Michael. You are the most precious thing in my life." He stood up, walked around the table, and hugged her tenderly. Emma rose to meet him. They stood like that for a long time. This time there was no despair in their embrace, only quiet joy and peace. After a while, Michael pulled back slightly and looked into her eyes. "You know, to tell the truth, I haven't completely let go of the past yet. Memory sometimes throws up pictures and then it hurts. But every time I look at you next to me and let go, because I see you are here with me, the real you." Emma was silent, only stroking his hand. "And I believe you," he continued. "I believe again. Time may have passed, but I believe." Emma couldn't take it anymore. Tears rolled down her cheeks. "You have no idea how important these words are to me." Michael smiled and kissed her tenderly. Then, in a joking tone, he tried to diffuse the tension. "So, Mrs. Harper, consider your probationary period over. Personnel decisions regarding you will not be reviewed." Emma laughed through her tears. "Thank you for your trust, sir. I will try to live up to the title of an ideal wife in the future." "You're already worthy," he whispered, stroking her cheek. At that moment, Michael's phone beeped somewhere in his pocket, signaling a new message. He glanced at it as usual. It was a notification from his calendar. Michael chuckled and showed the screen to Emma. "Doctor's appointment, 9 o'clock tomorrow." Emma smiled and placed her hand on her still flat stomach. "Well, now Dad is already setting the schedule." Michael carefully covered her hand with his. "Not Dad, but Mom first of all. Your examination is tomorrow." Yes, in a few months their family was expecting an addition. It happened unexpectedly. As soon as the stress went away, Emma's health and strength were restored, and at the end of the summer they were surprised to learn that they were expecting a child. For both of them, it was like a sign from above. It meant that life was giving them a chance for a new beginning in the full sense of the word. "Do you think we can handle it?" Emma suddenly asked quietly, looking down at the new life that was glimmering under her palm. Michael smiled encouragingly. "Of course. We've already dealt with much more difficult things, and with the baby, even more so, especially since it's the fruit of our love, having gone through so much." He hugged her again gently. Emma closed her eyes, finally feeling truly calm. The moon shone outside the window, filling the yard of their new home with silver. The autumn night was quiet and peaceful. The Harper family would have their share of joys and trials ahead, just like any family. But the biggest secret that had nearly destroyed their union was left behind in the pages of the past. Now they had a new chapter to write, a chapter of trust, support, and love forged through hard experience. And they were determined to write it together, hand in hand, without secrets and lies, but with hope and faith in the future. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think, click to the next one.